Hello, it's this Lynne verse, and today I'm going to be wrapping up and talking about what I read in January and February of this year. I'm definitely going to be doing the live wrap ups for a little bit. I mentioned this on Twitter, but like the energy for me making a video, editing it just isn't there, and logistically going live is easier for me. Like I tried the haul was supposed to be no edits, and I got it into iMovie to just put in my opening and closer, and I was like, I have to edit. Like I can't not edit when it's right here. So it's better if I just don't have access to the footage if I'm trying to save myself work basically. So, in terms of what I read in those first 2 months of the year, first up is Minion by LA Banks. One moment, I'm just gonna be pulling up the covers on my phone so that people can see what they look like. Well, this is annoying. I unfortunately have my work email on my phone, so I'm just getting inundated with old emails that I already checked, but my phone doesn't know that for whatever reason. And it's just not letting me do what I want to do. Okay, so this is what the cover looks like. And I was gonna read this in 2020. I think I had it open in like December, and I got it out from the library. And the edition I had a prologue. And it starts off giving this prophecy, and it chosen one narrative, and it was literally like that Tiffany Pollard meme where she's like, "Oh no, not you," because chosen one narratives and I just don't get along. I find them a little boring. Um, like for me, for a chosen one narrative to work, the chosen person has to actually like have a purpose. Like they actually have to have like some sort of skill that makes it work. Like I don't like chosen one narratives where they're like it could be anybody because it's like it just seems to fly in the face of having a chosen one at all. Like if it could be anybody, then why didn't anybody just do something? Why are we waiting on this little prophecy to tell us what to do? But I digress. So I saw that and I was like, this isn't for me. So I put it down. And then I was buddy reading it with Harley the Cerebral Hedonist, Bria the Lockbooktician, Erica of the Broken Spine, and Ashley of Bookish Realm. And the live show was originally on Harley's channel, but he's doing some revamp, so he deleted it. I don't think it's available anymore. But yeah. Also, I think Brie was hosting Black Weenathon in February, so I read it for that too. Oh, sorry, I didn't see a button in there. Hey, Aaron. Hello. Hey, Kiki. Yeah, no, it's terrible. I don't like it. Yeah, for me, the ability makes it a little easier. Sorry for that big delay because I have my script up. Um, I'll just put it up so that I can also see the comments as they come in and respond to them. So I ended up talking about it a little bit there. In terms of what it's about, there's basically it's set in the 90s in Philly, and like 10 or 20 years prior, a demon was awoken. And there's this like group of vampire slayers who are running around Philly, getting rid of vampires, getting rid of demons. And this demon is doing something weird to the vampires. They're noticing that the creatures they're taking down have like different patterns, have different behaviors, and it's about them trying to like cope and deal with that change. Um, and LA Banks is kind of like a staple for talking about Black authors writing paranormal fiction, writing vampire fiction, and I really liked Slay, which was a vampire short story anthology, and that like acknowledged her, and so I was like, I should just read it. Harley was doing the live show. I was like, I just need to read it, and like, if you've seen it, and you basically know that it wasn't for me. Um, it wasn't terrible. Um, and hey T, um, oh, I'm talking about Minion by LA Banks. Sorry for that delay, because I don't have the paid version of StreamYard because I'm stingy. So I've just been holding up this lovely image from my phone. But basically, I just thought it was kind of okay. Like the action scenes are fun. Um I know some people were bothered that it was like very 90s in terms of how the characters talked and like what was in style and stuff, but like I don't know. I was pretty okay with that. Like I don't know. I think we have like this weird aversion to like things that indicate a time period if we've lived through that time period. Like I don't know if people are really like reading like these classics and being like, "Wow, this is so cringe." Like, "Ooh, you can tell this was written in the 1800s." Like, "Oh no, like a chiffon dress." So wild, so dated. Right? Like, I don't know if people are really having that, but I think because like, if it's a decade that we're set in, that we've lived through, we kind of remember what we were like in that decade, and so we're harder on stuff. I wasn't really conscious in the 90s. I was born in the tail end of the 90s, so I don't have opinions on the 90s, so I was very okay with Minion by LA Banks. T, we did not. We gave very fair, measured critique. we I would never trash. I try not to, I should say. Hey Sarah. Um but yeah, I just thought it was okay. I hear it gets better. I probably won't be reading farther down because paranormals just aren't my thing. And I'm not trying to force it. In terms of things that I did like, I honestly really liked the vampires when they did show up. They're like, we don't get to see a lot of them until like the second half of the book, but it was just so over the top, and like you could just tell LA Banks was having fun writing it. Like I remember like I think they were in like some vampire music studio, and like they have like this like meat and like covered dishes and like human blood and like champagne glasses. And I pretty distinctly remember them like vaping, or they had some sort of like blood hookah going on. I was like, this is so ridiculous and so fun. Like that was probably like my favorite scene from the book. Um I generally enjoyed the erotic subtext. Like, what is a vampire story without an erotic subtext? Hey, Erica. Talking about Minion by LA Banks. I'm on the tail end of it. Yeah, I think there's this whole thing about like basically the vampires are part of some like seven deadly sins, biblical allegory sort of in world. So I think it was the music studio's just supposed to be like, all this money, very lavish, like very like full of vice and stuff, and so that's why I think it was a music studio. um but yeah, it was a vampire music studio. And yeah, so I thought the erotic subtext was fun. Like, what was it? It was more so in the second half of the book where like one of the vampires just like has recently gained I'm almost done, Erica. Bear with me. I'm almost done. Where one of the oh gosh, it was like the lead vampires just turns someone. He's kind of like holding the fact that they're recently turned and they want blood. He's like holding that over them. And there's like some erotic subtext there that I liked. When it got like outright sexual, it was like way too much for me. Like there was like a vampire who's like ate somebody's genitals and like mauled somebody. her genitals were like dissolving people. It was a lot. It was way too much for me. It was gory and ridiculous and fun, but it wasn't like I wasn't like, I need to read more of this. So I thought Minion was all right. I could see why people like it, but it's really not my thing. Next up, mm, is a graphic novel, Sacrifice the Darkness by Roxane Gay, which is an adaptation of a short story, I believe, by the same name. It's Roxane Gay's short story, if I remember correctly, and then she was given this like, or she like got this deal. No, it was wild. It was so wild. I was like reading what, and I didn't say even all the wild parts in that summary. Like Kiki was there. Kiki was on a live or like a reading sprint where I read one of the scenes I did not mention here, and I like did a double take. A double take. I was like, what? What on earth is going on here? Okay, so Sacrifice of Darkness. Oh, Sacrifice of Darkness by Roxane Gay and Tracy Lynn Oliver. Arts by Rebecca Kirby and James Fenner. Oh no. We're having formatting issues. It was a lot. So you can't see the whole thing. Oh wow, and you can't even see it anyway because my brightness is probably up too high. Sorry, so I was just trying to show you the cover. Sacrifice of Darkness. And I really did not like this. It was a short read. But I really spent the whole time asking myself, who is this for? It's like a sci-fi short story. Well, I said it's based on a short story. It's a sci-fi story. It's about this like future Earth where there's this like sorry, Kiki. Yeah, I had my phone on like high brightness because outside taking photos over the weekend, and I did not realize that like you literally could not see anything on the screen. Okay. So for people who missed the Minion, this is the Minion cover, since I realize now that no one could see that. But I was just so confused. So it's set in this like future Earth. It's a sci-fi. There's this like town of miners who mine this stuff called, I want to say it's Flareon because it reminded me of a Pokemon every time they said it. And I was wondering if they didn't have people who were like of the generation that were playing Pokemon to tell them that like maybe they should name it something different. But these miners are digging up the Flareon, and it's pretty miserable. It used to be an occupation that people like took pride in, but like they feel very exploited by the people they work for. The conditions are miserable. Suicide rates are up in the mines, and one of the miners somehow like steals a spaceship and flies it into the sun. And after he flies the spaceship into the sun, light disappears. There's no sunlight coming down to Earth, and that condition holds for a couple years. And it's about the family of the guy who flew the plane into the sun and their life on Earth in the aftermath. And the reason why I asked who's this for is because I was like reading reviews of people who liked it, and they're like, oh, it's about like class struggle and like finding hope. And I was like I guess, but I felt like emotionally it didn't really hit any of those notes, just because of the writing style. Like it's hard to explain, but basically I feel like there's a way that people can write these stories where it's like very obviously a thought experiment, and it has like no bearing in reality. You're not really expecting the characters to act like people or have real people problems, and you can like kind of make that work in a story if you have the right tone for it. But I didn't feel like they were really able to establish that tone here. Not really with the writing of the story, and definitely not with the artwork. The artwork is kind of, it's fine, but like I feel like if they were gonna go like this is a weird experimental story route, the artwork needed to be like bigger and like weirder. As it was just kind of realistic, and like maybe the colors weren't like realistic colors, but like other than that, it didn't really make me like suspend my disbelief about what I was reading. Um, in terms of like what I mean by not really having a root in reality, so the sun's blocked out, right? It's blocked out for years. There's no talk on how that like affects people's life on Earth much at all, really, which is weird because everyone's like very, very angry about it. But like, if we lost sunlight for years, if we lost sunlight for a day, honestly, it would be like catastrophic. I don't know like what's the time limit on like how long we can go without sunlight, but like sunlight does a lot of stuff. Like it gets the food that we feed to the animals that we eat and that we might eat. It like keeps the earth at like a decent temperature. Like I don't think the heat from like the core alone is enough to keep the world alive. Um it was an interesting oh okay. It was an interesting idea, but I didn't think the execution was there. Few days at most. Okay, that's good. That's good to know. I'm thinking of Bree talking about the white holes and the black holes are all gonna like swirls up and destroys. It's good to know that we have a few days to sort things out if the sun goes away. Losing the warmth would be the worst. Okay. Um, yeah, it wouldn't be long at all. And there's like no explanation on how they're able to keep anyone alive. For weeks. Like there's no real change in the life. Like people aren't like walking outside wearing jackets. Like there's no talk about how they have to keep like livestock healthy or anything like that. It just seems to be like mildly inconvenient, which was very strange to me. I didn't really connect to any of the characters. Like there's supposed to be this love story going on, but like that like with the son of the guy who flew into the sun, and it's supposed to parallel the love story of his parents, and I was just very not feeling it. I thought it was like I was like I could see the parallels, but this doesn't stir any emotions in me. Um yeah, I don't even remember if there was panic, Kiki. It was like very strange. People just seemed like I don't know. There wasn't a lot of focus on like these human emotions. Like we kind of get told in like a blurb that like people are hoping the sun's gonna come back, but then it doesn't come back, and then they get angry, um, and stuff like that. But like I didn't feel like we really got the human impact of what it would be like if we lost the sun, which is very distracting because it's a major plot point. The romance didn't really work for me. I didn't the characters just didn't feel real to me. They just kind of felt like sketches of people walking around, doing things for reasons I didn't really understand. The things they just did were so strange to me. Like I remember, I thought the boy took like a girl that he liked on a picnic, and like he had like at the picnic they had like biscuits and whipped cream, and I've not heard of that food combination before, so I was very thrown. And there was like a lot of detail in it too, so I was like, my confusion just compounded. Yeah, yeah, I don't know about that, Kiki. Kiki said that's weird. Seasonal depression is a thing, and there's still sun. Yeah, like they might have mentioned it offhand, but like not a whole lot. And then what else? And then yeah, there's supposed to be like this tension where the townspeople are like, we don't like living in this world without sun, and we're so angry at this family because their dad is the reason we don't have sun. And you know, every time we don't have every week we go without getting the son back, you know, we're gonna bring these people on trial and harangue them. And it was just very weird to me because the family lives in like a compound because we're told that like they've been getting threats and stuff and they don't like to socialize with people because people don't like them. But like it just felt like there was no tension to that part of the story because I was like, they just keep bringing you back week after week and like nothing's happening. Like there's no consequences. They're just like, there's no son. We don't like you. There's no son. It's like, yeah, there's no son. Like, I don't know what you thought was going to change. I don't know. I didn't even know why they're showing up. Like, if I had a compound specifically for the purpose of like staying away from people, you could not convince me to leave the gates just for you to tell me the same thing every week about how you don't like me and it's our fault the son's not here. Like, I didn't get it. And so I think that was like a really weird tension in the story. Like I said, that the characters don't really act like how I'd expect people to act. There isn't really a whole focus on like making the story feel real or like making the story make sense. And I didn't feel like there was like enough stuff going on in the art to like make me suspend my disbelief and make myself like feel like this is like an experimental, surreal type of story. I feel like if you're like a typical comic reader, like a typical sci-fi comic reader, I feel like there wasn't a whole lot there for you because the sci-fi stuff isn't the focus. There's not a lot of focus on how they have spaceships. They eventually, I guess it's a spoiler, so I can't tell you, but there's a bit where they start going to the mines more, and like they, for some reason, they feed this Flareon stuff to a child, and I was like, why are you giving this? Why would you give this kid like a rock to eat? Like, I don't. You wouldn't just give the child coal to eat. Why would you give them this Flareon energy fuel rock? No, it doesn't matter. It's not even that big a deal, I feel like. But I just like finished the book and I was just like, I don't know who this is for. Like, I don't feel like it was marketed in a way that was going to get to the target audience. The writing wasn't really clear to me who it was for. Hey, Bree. And I clearly was not the target audience because there wasn't really anything about it I particularly liked. Like the art was fine, like I said, but it wasn't like enough where I would like buy this comic just to look at the art, you know. On a more positive note, I also read Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. This was a buddy read with Sophia of Fantasy Book Addict. And I won this in a Twitter giveaway. Erica, I promise you, if I tell you the spoiler, it doesn't change anything. It's like not even that interesting. And my everything I have to say still stands. I won this in a Twitter giveaway from Chinelo Chidebe. So thank you to her for that. And I in terms of other things to plug, Solar Powered, the book club, is going to be reading this sometime in, I think it is September. Yes, it is in September. And I'll put that in the description box for people who are watching later. Or if you just like search it on Eventbrite, you can find the ticket so you can like join in. This is about this like fantasy world that to me, I was very surprised. I never saw it getting comps to The Crucible, the play, because it is basically like Salem, like Puritan, New England. There's a spooky forest. They hate witches. Like it is, it is very much The Crucible to me. And it's set in this town called Bethel, and the main character's name is Emmanuel. And there are the people in Bethel who are pretty much white, and then there are the people who live in the outskirts who are black. And people in Bethel don't like the people in the outskirts. It is again like very I I don't know exactly what religion or what like part of Christianity said this, but like that dark skin was like a curse from God. I thought that was based on like a real world religious thing, and like that's here in the book. So like the people of Bethel don't really like the people at the outskirts, and Emmanuel is the daughter of someone from the outskirts and someone from Bethel. Um, and basically, there's this wood called the Dark Wood because it's dark and you're not supposed to go in there. There's supposed to be witches in there. Um, and she's coming back from the market one day, and it makes more sense for her to do it in the story, but she's like, why don't I go into the woods? And she realizes that like a plague is basically on the way. She realizes the town is cursed, and she's gonna have to figure out how to stop it somehow. And she meets this guy named Ezra, who is the son of the high priest. Her mother is dead, and sorry, this was important information I should have given earlier. Her mother is dead. She was killed for marrying Emmanuel's father, and Emmanuel's father I know is definitely killed for marrying Emmanuel's mother. And then I don't remember if the mother killed herself or if the townspeople killed the mother too. But basically, Emmanuel's parents are both dead, and she's living with her mother's side of the family in Bethel. She is Black and mixed. And what else was there? And Bethel is a mess. Like, okay. So Erica said the Curse of Ham is what that is based on. And like I said, Bethel is a mess. The man who runs so basically, polygamy is a thing here. It's very common for men to have multiple wives. The main preacher, like you meet him and you're like, this man is no good. Like he's like, the world is corrupt and evil outside of Bethel. Don't leave Bethel. And I was like, leave Bethel. That man is a liar. I refuse to believe the rest of the world is as cursed as Bethel. I was wrong about a lot of things. I really did not know where the story was going to go. I think it was a shortcut, T. It was either she was taking a shortcut home from the market, or like she had some ram she was going to sell in the market, and a storm came and the ram ran in there, and she felt obligated to go in and get it because they're poor and they can't just have rams running away like that. But the wood is right there at all times, and she went in. And where was I? So yes, this town is no good. Abuse is rampant. And especially with the polygamy stuff, like they're marrying like young girls, like 16-year-old girls to these like 40-some-year-old men, and it is like danger, danger, danger from like page 1. And so in terms of what I thought of the book, I think that's all the setup I really need to give right now. I really loved it. Like I was debating on how many stars to give it on Goodreads, but like I really love it. Like this is definitely like a book that made me go like, I'm not a big horror person. I'm kind of like finding out what I like about it. And this is one where I was like, ooh, more like this. It was so atmospheric. It was so creepy, like just all the time. Because just like life in the town, you always know that something's gonna go bad in the town. The woods being like right there, and like the things that they see in the woods. And I love the descriptions of the gore. There's some like really bloody, nasty stuff that happens in this book. And I'm thinking specifically there's a bit where someone starts bleeding out of her ears, and Henderson says it looks like red teardrop earrings. That like is just like that image is burned in my mind. There's like people's arms get taken apart. I would recommend it, Erin. If you have like a library you could get it from to read first, I feel like that's always my go-to, but like I I definitely think that it's like worth getting. Um and so there's the gore, there's the atmosphere, it's gross, it's great. I didn't know where the story was going. Like I was so sure that this was just like a Bethel problem because like I said, I didn't trust a single person in that town. No one. Um like really no one I thought was very trustworthy. The authority figures definitely not. Um Even just like the regular townspeople don't particularly like Emmanuel because Curse of Ham. And what else? There's like sort of this like romance in the background with the preacher's son Ezra. I didn't trust him. um Emmanuel's family is like kind of a mixed bag. Like her grandpa seems okay, in my opinion, the grandpa is like well-meaning, but not super helpful all the time. Like some bad stuff happens while he's around, and I was like, I need you to be doing more because some of his wives are just a problem. Like Emmanuel went into the woods, and one of the wives found out about it, and she like burned her with a poker. Stuff like that. Like they do not play around about the rules. They don't play around about the rules. Um, so I was just so sure that like none of these people could be trusted. Oh, it drops at the end. I didn't think it dropped at the end. Um, hmm. It's been a little bit because obviously February is a whiles ago, but I thought that it was pretty consistent. Like it is a slower book. Like and I think at the end it is a little unclear sometimes where things are gonna go, but I also wasn't really mad at it. Like I just kind of assumed that it was just gonna be kind of like a slow atmospheric book and like I wasn't super duper worried about the plot. But that might just be a me thing. Um in terms of like what else happens in the story, I tolerated the romantic relationship. Like I said, I couldn't tell where things were going, so I was like very suspicious of Ezra. I tolerated the romantic relationship. I know other people like really go up for Ezra. Um, I'm not one of them. He doesn't even really do anything wrong in the book. He's just there, and he's relatively powerful in the social order, and so I'm like, you can't mess around with him. Um, yeah, Emmanuel's just kind of like on the fringes of the thing, so I'm like, it just takes the smallest thing really to get her in trouble. Um, there's a lot of stuff about um like family relationships. I already kind of mentioned that her family situation is kind of fraught. Emmanuel like really, I think, idolizes or thinks very highly of her mom. She really wants to know more about her. And there's a moment where she has to really reconsider that. Um, there's a moment where I don't know how to put it, but I think Emmanuel realizes that her mom just isn't the woman that she thought that she was. I think it's easy as a kid to have very like rose tinted idealistic views of like what your parent is. And I think also sometimes, I don't know, kids just think that their parents are always looking out for their best interests and they don't really realize or really think through that like parents are their own people too and that they are going to be self-centered too and that for some parents having a kid isn't a selfless thing. It's like maybe it's like an an ego thing. Maybe it's like some way to reassure themselves about something. And Emmanuel kind of has to contend with that realization. Um, the villains are great. We don't know a whole lot about them. There's kind of like these primordial forces, but I did really love their descriptions. Um, and I touched on this already that Emmanuel is mixed, but it's kind of interesting watching her navigate that. Because her ability, she can't really go to the outskirts. Like Bethel's a very close community. Like they don't have the internet. Like she can't just like send people an email or something. Pretty much any way that she could get in touch with her family in the outskirts is just beyond her reach because it's just such a tightly controlled community. And there's a part where she ends up going to the outskirts looking for answers about something. And I'm interested to see, because I think there's going to be a sequel to this. And I'm interested to see what the people in the outskirts are going to be up to in the next books, because their relationship to the Darkwood seems to be very different from the people of Bethel's. Like they also understand that the Darkwood is like very dangerous and that like evil forces dwell there. But there seems to be more of a reverence or at least a healthy respect. That like the Darkwood has a place in the world, which is interesting. So I hope to hear more about that in the sequel. And it's also interesting because Emmanuel shows up and is like asking questions of people. And there's a bit where she's talking to a man from the outskirts, and I forget what exactly happens, but like he doesn't really claim her as a person from the outskirts. And she's like taken aback by that. She doesn't like that. But also like I felt like that was fair. Like it seems like for reasons outside of her control and also just partially for reasons in her control, Emmanuel doesn't seem to think too much about the people in the outskirts. Like it comes up like whenever they cross paths, but like she seems to very much be like a Bethel girl. Like her thoughts are very much about like the people that she knows in Bethel, and I don't know if she really thinks of like what connections could she possibly have with the people in the outskirts. And which did hurt a little bit because there's a bit towards the end where there's like this final face off, and like specifically the women from the outskirts are some of the first people to like jump to her defense. So it is a little sad that there are some people who seem like very eager to like take up for her, but like she's still like not really sure how. Well, she doesn't really seem to think of them too much, basically, is what it boils down to. Which, like I said, is very understandable because of like the decision makers in her life is also kind of just like sad to me. And I'm wondering if that's going to be taken up more in the sequel, because Henderson kind of like touched on that in an interview that like the people in the outskirts weren't consulted about what happened to Emmanuel. Like she wasn't really even like offered to her grandparents on her dad's side. It was just assumed that like her mother's parents were going to take her. So I'm interested to see what else happens with this. I feel like it could go interesting places. Also, also I forgot that Emmanuel is such a goody protagonist. Like I finished this and I was like, ugh, I need I need someone who's like meaner and a little more self-centered for next week. It makes me tired. Emmanuel just gets done so dirty by the people of Bethel, and like when the chips are down, it's really the people of Bethel that she's thinking of and like putting their interests first. And it's not really my thing. I'm not big on goody protagonists. So I was like, I get it, and also like I need a I need a palate cleanser after that. So that was my thought on Year of the Witching. So circling back to this about the review saying it drops off at the end, I can kind of see that. I think throughout the story it is kind of slow to build and it's very atmospheric, but like sorry, as I'm talking about it, it's jogging my memory, but I feel like these pieces are introduced and the conflict is building. And there is sort of a period where that kind of like stalls for a little bit. Like we're not really sure how she's going to resolve this big final thing. Um, and like a lot of people get involved. Like oh, um, and so I could see it feeling like kind of muddled at the end. I wasn't too bothered by it though because I just kind of been like I'm here I'm here for the gore, I'm here for the witches, I'm here for the occult. Um I wasn't really too worried about how the plot would get resolved. Yeah, which it sounds kind of bad because like the world is at stake, but I was just enjoying um because at the end we get to see the witches from the wood and we've seen them in glimpses before, but we get to see them all together and they are a sight. This reminds me of I, Tituba by Maurice Condé. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. But she definitely didn't portray Tituba as a goody two shoes, more like frustrating as hell. Um, I was like, who was I thinking of? There's this like novella, A Ruin of Shadows by L.D. Lewis about this like assassin who's just completely immoral and it's a bloodbath. And I was like, I need to read this after I got through Year of the Witching. I don't know, the goody two shoes characters, they make me feel tired. They're like, I've been persecuted and like two people in all of my life were nice to me, but think of them. I must save the world for them. And I'm like, don't you live in this world too? Don't you want to save the world for you? And like the people are actually nice to you. I don't know. That's just a me thing, I think. I think that's a personal preference. And then last up is Wings of Elle by Wings of Elle. Wings of Ebony by J.L. It looks like this. I need to read I Tituba too, Erica, at some point. Probably not this year, but at some point. I won this in a Goodreads giveaway. And I felt okay. Not too late. Honestly, it was a very tangled live. I don't feel like you missed out on too much. But Wings of Ebony by JL is a young adult urban fantasy about this girl, Rue. Her father is basically never in her life, and her mother's recently died. And then her father's people show up and whisk her away to this magic island of Gazan where people have magical abilities and stuff. And they're like, you can never talk to humans again. Never. We have to keep the secret safe. And she's like, but I have a sister, so obviously I am going to talk to humans again. Yeah. Maybe next year for I Tituba, maybe next year. But Rue, yeah, Rue's the main character, is like, well, obviously I'm going to be seeing humans again because my sister's a human, and I'm not going to just leave her in like alone in the world with no family anywhere. And basically, how do I put this? In terms of the comps, I saw it compared to Children of Blood and Bone and The Hate You Give. Um, I haven't read The Hate U Give, but from what I've heard about it, I'd say the comp is accurate. I'd also throw in A River of Royal Blood by Amanda Joy, because there is some like discussion of colonialism here, and that reminded me of that YA fantasy. And I would content warning, there's a scene where a black character is killed and there's like a racist slur said. And it's like decently graphic. Every book does get compared to that book. Would I say that it's super accurate in this case? Not really, no, but they're gonna keep doing it. I've just resigned myself to it at this point. So in terms of like what I liked about it, I thought Rue was like a very likable protagonist. I thought she was a very relatable protagonist. I might talk about it at some other point in the future about what I think about what people mean when they say a relatable protagonist, but like I think some people say relatable protagonist when it's just like some generic nice character who maybe they feel small or they're experiencing some loss that like people can relate to because we've probably all felt small or experienced a loss at some point. And I generally sometimes I use relatable in that way, but for me, I think I also use it when I feel like an emotion or experience I've had that like isn't super talked about or whatever is validated. And in this case, Rue doesn't really trust authority figures. Specifically, like I think it was like the governor of her city and the cops in her city, and I felt I felt validated. I thought that was relatable. She doesn't really trust like these people coming in with her dad because her dad's been absent all her life, and he's like, "What do you want?" Like all this stuff happened, and you weren't here. What do you want? Why are you here now? Oh, and her dad actually does show up too, and I was like, "Yeah, that is me. That is me as well." And in general, I think Rue's also like very warm. She's a very warm character, and she's very protective of her family and her community. In terms of other things that I enjoyed about this story, I said it's an urban fantasy. Some people might feel conflicted about that, but because like part of it is set on the East Row in Texas, and then part of it is set in this like fantasy island of Guzan. But I felt like the heart of the story was really in the East Row. I thought that was really where the story was the strongest. And I think that was something that like really shone about this book was talking about this urban community, talking about like what's life like there, what are the ups and the downs, and also like how frequently or like I guess how seamlessly this novel incorporates African American vernacular English. Like pretty much it's narrated from the first person point of view from Rue's POV. And I think that's like big. Like that's not really something I see a whole lot in fantasy from traditional publishing very infrequently. And I thought it was like a really big deal that this was a book that seemed to me to be getting a lot of publicity. Like I felt like I saw it everywhere on my timeline for like the week before it was released. I would say it's a fast read. I think I got through it pretty quickly. So those are all like exciting things, and like I think it's gonna push like YA fantasies in an interesting direction. In terms of like my overall thoughts on it, I was a little meh on it. I'm not a big young adult reader in general. And for me, why I was really interested in this book was because of the gods. I really love stories with like original mythologies. I really love stories featuring humans' interactions with deities. And so I was just really excited to see like what the gods are going to be like in this story. And they're not really around. Like they're part of the island's religion. But like based on how it was handled in this book. I don't think we're ever really going to see the gods like appear on page. I don't think it's going to be a focus going forward, so that was like a disappointment for me. Um what else? I wanted a little bit more from the world building. Like I said that the East Row is kind of the heart of the story, and I felt like we got to Gazan, and I just had like questions about things like um not necessarily questions, but like it just didn't feel as real. Like it felt like there were like little holes and gaps in terms of like how people like talked about their identities, um how people handled conflicts, and this is something that is talking. I don't know, battery, gotta speed this up. And this is something that has like commentary on like real world issues, specifically like policing in um like urban neighborhoods, low income urban neighborhoods. And it felt like at the end, to me, it felt like there's like this moment of catharsis that like didn't really make sense to me, like given the logic of the magic system. And that's all I'm gonna say about that. I was just casually talking about it with Britt Reiterly, and she did bring up that like a good thing about this book is that like Rue gets to be mad. Um what like I forgot until Rue brought sorry, not until Rue, until Britt brought it up, like how long Rue gets to be mad for and like what she gets to do to the people who've crossed her. Um and so I do want to mention that like that is something that is probably gonna be cathartic for people. Um and um I also kind of wish that it had been structured a little bit differently. There are time skips in this book, and for me, I wanted it to, I wanted the time skips to feel a little bit more purposeful. Like I felt like it was like, oh, this is getting introduced because there's this facet of character building that could have been like going on throughout, but like it kind of wasn't going on throughout, so we have to put in this time skip here to introduce this character information now. Um, and I kind of wish that it had been like less clunky in that way. And also, I'm going to compare this to Legendborn just because the release dates were like relatively close, and I think it is a vaguely similar concept, and that there's sort of like the general trope book type of, you know, a character from the human world gets a portal into this fantasy world, they get some into this magical world, and that's normally like a celebration, like a thing where it gives the characters access to all this magic and all these like wonderful things. And in Legendborn and Wings of Ebony, it does give them access to these things, and also their entry into this world is like an allegory for Black people like navigating these predominantly white spaces. And I think both books did this thing where it was kind of like too long, where like the the world of magic, the world that's like this allegory for the or the stand-in, I guess, for the predominantly white space, is like seen as the only source of magic. Like it for me, I just kind of wish that I don't think it's as big an issue in Wings of Ebony because we do spend so much time in the city, but in Legendborn, I think it definitely did deter readers. I felt like there were people giving up at like the third way mark, where maybe if things had been introduced earlier, they might have been more invested in the story. Here it was really probably only an issue for me because I did really want to know more about the fantasy and the magic elements. Like that for me was like a very big draw, and it just wasn't as present. But like if this type of story kind of becomes a thing going forward. I hope writers introduce yeah, it's not everyone's thing. I think it's a very polarizing read, and I get why. Yeah, Sarah. Amari and the Night Brothers, I feel like, is in the same tradition, but for a younger audience because it's a middle grade. And that's why I say if it becomes a thing, because I feel like it's going to become a thing for younger readers, this type of story. I hope that's introduced earlier, that like the Black people or the people of color, if it's like discussing like other groups, have their own magic system and like their own razzle dazzle. I don't know how else to put it, because it's like alienating for me as a fantasy reader to be like, yay, Black people in the magic world. Oh, the magic world is like our world, and they also don't. Well, not quite. The magic world also doesn't want the Black characters there. It's also very hostile to Black characters, and the white people dominate the magic. It's like alienating, and it's not fun. And I would like it to be introduced sooner that there are Black people in this magic world and that they have magic and they do magic things. For other genres that, or for other types of books that take up this type of story. So I don't know if everyone's gonna want to like wait it out, you know. Like I said, it was more so with Legendborn, I think, than with this book. I feel like there's one other thing. There's some insta love in here, which is fine. Yeah, which is fine. Yeah, like that's why I really liked The Conductors by by Nicole Glover, because we really do spend a lot of the time with African American characters and their magic system. But that's an adult story. Oof, running low on battery here. I don't think I'm gonna make it. We're gonna mute and turn off video while I run upstairs really quick and grab my charger. Okay, I'm back. So where was I? Right, where I was talking about these schools where not these schools, these stories where like a human character's introduction into this magic world serves as an allegory for like Black people navigating prejudice and racism in I did track in high school. Because some of it stuck with me. Yeah, T. I don't know if I've seen it in a whole lot of other places, but I just don't. I wanna nip it in the bud. I don't want it to be a thing. um, yeah, I don't, because I feel like if we just introduce it earlier, then we're gonna get the same point. We can talk about the same things, but it's just less of a turn off. I feel like there's less like waiting and downtime. Um, Okay, so there was another thing I was going to talk about. Where am I? Talk about that. Oh, in terms about things I liked, I forgot to mention this earlier. Um, I don't read a lot of young adult. Trimming down on that, and I definitely don't read a lot of contemporaries. But from my little foray into young adult, it seems like when we're going to talk about like racism and stuff like that, there's going to be like a main character of color, and then it seems fairly common for them to have like a white friend. And I've noticed that at some point, the main character and the white friend butt heads, because the white friend doesn't understand racism. Um, Maybe they say something out of line. Maybe it's just like maybe the main character is going through some like dilemma, or they like need someone to listen to them, and the white friend just, it's outside of their scope. They just can't do it. Um, and I'm not big on those storylines, just because for me, it doesn't have a lot of tension. Like, I feel like young adult is more obviously trying to teach a lesson than like adult. So I'm like, well, obviously we're not just gonna have a falling out with the white friend. Even though that's a thing that happens in real life, like real friendships do end over things like this. That's not gonna happen in this book. The They're gonna try and teach a lesson out of it. So obviously the white friend has to come around, even if that doesn't necessarily seem very logical, based on like what they know or how they've been acting. They're just gonna have to come around, right? Because it's YA and that's what's gonna happen. And there is sort of that storyline here, but there's actually a lot of suspense in it for me. I actually didn't know if their friendship was gonna make it. And I don't really remember what Ruth said, but I just felt, yeah, Jay, because it's to teach white readers about racism, I feel like they're not just going to be like, and sometimes or frequently, you mess up and people cut you off because life is too short to be dealing with these stresses. They're going to be like, oh, the white person learned a lesson, so you can learn a lesson. And it's just not suspenseful. And to me, sometimes it's not realistic, like based on what the white character knows and what they've been willing to give up or sacrifice before to like this reckoning that happens, or like this knowledge that happens. I'm like, how'd they get from there to there so quick? Like, I've never seen that in my life. But this storyline did have suspense to it. Like, I didn't know if the friendship was going to make it. And I felt like Rue was able to be pretty honest about how she was feeling. Like, she's like, I'm frustrated. Like, there's all this stuff going on. You're making it about you, and I don't even want to deal with you right now because I want to fix the stuff that's going on. So I appreciated that. Yeah, I'm not big on it. So I thought that, if we're gonna do it, I thought that, you know, JL had like a very good spin on it this time around. Was there anything else? And I was just thinking in general, like how things that I would have thought were believable, like even like, I don't know, maybe like 6 years ago, they just don't seem believable to me anymore. Like there's a scene where a character is like, there's some wrongdoing happening by like a government official. I'm going to record the wrongdoing. I'm going to get a confession out of them. And then I'm going to give the wrongdoing to like the press, or I'm going to show it to the people of the world. And that's going to create this change. And just like after since I'm in the US after the, like, Trump presidency stuff, I was like, "Really?" Like, I don't know, like, I've definitely like, 6 years ago, I definitely sat through, like, trials or, like, things where, like, it seems, like, obvious, like, it's like, "Why are we even having a trial?" Like, surely this evidence is so much that something's gonna happen, and then nothing happened. I think just with the presidency, it just happened so frequently. Like, I felt like every month it was another thing. Um, and we all knew it. We all saw it and sat through it, and, like, it didn't seem to change anything. It just seemed to cause, like, talk and, like, nothing to happen. And that's not a critique on anything that JL wrote. That was just, like, a me being like, "Oh, wow," like, I don't know, it's, like, weird for me to have a moment where I realize how much I've changed over, like, such a relatively short period of time. Um, so yeah, that was my thoughts on what I read. Um, I can stick around for, like, 5 more minutes if people wanna chat, about stuff, or I can just, like, wait for some of these comments to get in because I know it's a little delayed on StreamYard. But after that, I'm just gonna wish you all a good night, and we can go about our business. Um, yeah. Yeah, I didn't realize it was gonna be I guess it's not that fast because it took I mean, it's 4 years, but, like, hmm, yeah. Yeah, I don't know about what that was. So I'm trying to think. I don't know, I'm also someone I don't know. I'm also someone who's very cynical, which I'm working on, but like, I remember the events leading up to Trump's election, and me being like, "We've already lost." Like, the fact that you can be, like, a political candidate and say this type of stuff and act this way, we've already lost. Like, that we can get this far is already, like, too much. But yeah, it is just wild how quickly you adjust to things or change your view of what reality is. Um, yeah. In terms of keeping up the chit chat until 8:15 my time. What am I reading now? I'm reading Bacchanal by Veronica Henry. I got an advanced reader's copy, and so I'm slowly working my way through that. It's good. Um, it's a slower go for me, not because of anything with the writing. I'm just feeling like very. It's weird because I feel like it's been a while since I've had to do like a very structured like review for something, but like I'm kind of tired. This is good to know for next year that I'm going to burn out of doing structured reviews very quickly. Like I don't want to do them for the rest of the year. And it's good to know that the number of books I can do standalone reviews for is like much lower than I initially thought. I did not think I was going to be so tired this fast. Um, did you feel like Starland was a bit of a letdown? So I recently posted my review of Starland by River Solomon. It's up if you want to watch it. And yeah, I did. Um, I do have like very high expectations for River Solomon as an author. Um, and I think that's also like a bad thing that like I get myself really hyped up and really excited for stuff. And like I know for a fact that when I read The Deep, I was overly hard on The Deep because I read it like 6 months or something after I read it the first like I read it the first time and I was like a little let down. And I revisited 6 months later. I was like, what was I going on about? Like what more did I want? There's so much more to read and interpret. Like this is great. So like I'm sure I'm gonna revisit Starland and like some later time and notice the stuff I missed and be like, wow, I was too hard on it. You and your high expectations. But yeah, I did want more out of it and because I just wanted to love it. Like I wanted it to be my 5 star and it was like so strong for me the first half. I was like let down by the ending. I know you watched, G. I saw your comment. I know you're working through it. What else? What else? I'm reading The Shadow Speaker by Nnedi Okorafor, which is a very interesting read. It was like, I think the second book that she published is in middle grade, and it's like the sci-fi set in the country of Niger in the year 2070. Science fantasy, I think. And I'm kind of surprised it doesn't get talked about more. Like, I think it's relatively hard to find. Like, I don't know if it's currently still in print. Like, it might have just had the one print run. Because I remember looking for used copies, and they were like more expensive than used copies usually are. I did read Remote Control Erica. Probably going to reread it at some point because I'm realizing there's a lot of connections between all of Nnedi's works, and I do want to revisit it at some point. So I think there's also like access issues with Shadow Speaker in terms of it not getting talked about as much, but I'm like, wow, this is a story with a Black Muslim protagonist. There's a couple like polygamous, polyamorous relationships in there. Like there's this like warrior woman Ja who has 2 husbands. It seems like there's a lot of stuff going on that seems like BookTube would like it, and I don't really see it get talked about that much. I see a lot more talk about her other work, mostly her adult stuff. Yeah. Kiki says, I don't think anyone really talks about any of her work before Akata Witch much. Yeah, I think Akata Witch was really when she took off. So I don't see people talk about Zyra the Windseeker that much either, which could be because it's middle grade, and it seems like, I don't know. Let me not say that because my view of BookTube is very, very skewed. But yeah, Zyra the Windseeker is more recent. I know there's a couple of versions of it out, and people don't really talk about it. And it was just kind of weird to me because, if you're like, what's that on your fingers? I had gummy savers, and I put them on my fingers because sometimes I'm very childish. And I was just thinking about it because Nnedi Okorafor was like doing a lot of stuff before there's kind of like this big like cohort of other Black authors like to boost and stuff like that. Like I think Shadow Speaker was published in like 2007. Yeah. And like, if we're talking like Black girls on fantasy covers, Zyra the Windseeker did have a Black girl on the fantasy cover, and that was probably published in like what? 2005, 2006. So I think I don't know. For me, it's just interesting in terms of like how people on the internet talk about like the chronology of like, who are the heavy hitters writing Black fantasy and science fiction for younger readers. I see a lot of people talking about Danielle Clayton. Well, not a lot. I see authors talking about Danielle Clayton and the Bells for young adult. But to me, it's just interesting because Nnedi Okorafor like predates that. I think her middle grades are kind of mature. I could see crossed over for other readers, but also like I guess because there wasn't like that quick like pickup after she wrote the books, her stuff for younger readers isn't talked about as much. That's my theory, but I'm just generally interested because I'm a dork. I think that stuff is very interesting. Like how we talk about people's contributions, how we talk about, how publishing has changed over time and who's made big impacts and who we just kind of don't talk about. So sorry, Kay asked, what's the best first book for Nnedi Okorafor? I think Binti is good because it's short. It's a novella trilogy. That's what mine was. And I think that one's like I think that's pretty tight. Sarah recommends Who Fears Death. I think I read that one shortly after I read Binti. I think I liked Binti more than Who Fears Death. I think Who Fears Death lags a little bit in the second half. But I think people who started with Who Fears Death generally will like Batchfoot and said that was a good intro. I have Who Fears Death, which is supposed to be getting that HBO adaptation, but still hasn't buzzed yet. Yeah. Yeah. Who Fears Death was gonna get the HBO adaptation. I thought I heard that George R.R. Martin was working on it, which is interesting because Who Fears Death deals very intimately with rape and sexual assault. And I generally haven't heard great things about how Martin handles those topics in his books. And I think that was one of the things I liked about Who Fears Death is that I felt like Okorafor showed like the brutality of it because it's like part of like this. It's basically soldiers raping people, and it's like part of this like general like political campaign. It's supposed to be like a statement. And I thought that she did a good job of showing the brutality of it and how it is like can be like weaponized, like on like this larger scale, while also not taking away the agency of the female characters while not like diminishing it. I felt like we got to spend a lot of time with like what is the emotional toll of this. Um so and I just haven't heard that about how Martin handles those issues. And so I was a little curious as to why. Well, I'm not curious as to why he's brought on. He's brought on because he's a big name. But for me, I did pause a little when I heard that. Yeah, I'm a little worried about how that's gonna go down. I think she does have pull because I've heard her talk about like updates at like interviews and panels, and she does talk about like pushing back on certain things and like being strategic and like what she's like this absolutely has to go in the series and like what for her is a negotiable. So I don't think like she's just like a bystander. I don't think that she's like I don't think like she just handed this off to somebody and like it's gonna disappear and then she's just gonna get the end product and like be like, what happened? Like I think she does have some say in it, but like yeah, it's just like very sensitive topic. And so I was like, I was a little worried. Um, I recommend it, Erica. Who Fears Death. I feel like you must. I feel like that's. I was gonna be like, someone must want to buddy read it with you, but we've been trying to buddy read Kintu for months. Not because there's anything wrong with Kintu. It's just my schedule is. I'm not great at anticipating how tired I'm gonna be. And so I think my schedule's all great. I think I'm all set. And then my schedule happens and I'm like, I need a break. I can't read any more this month. Or like, I also just know that Kintu's going to take a lot for me because I think it's like more of a literary work. And I'm like, I can't read this with like half a brain. Like I need my brain to be like fully functioning when I read this. So like I don't want to be like in the middle of a slump trying to get through this book. Um oh, so you optioned it? Let me look this up really quick. I don't want to be spreading rumors and fairy tales. Okay. So I don't know exactly what optioning means. I thought that was buying the rights. But in terms of Martin's role, he is a producer. So I don't know what that looks like exactly, but and I don't know the ins and outs of like who all works on a TV show and what everyone does, but like just for me, I was like I got a little nervous. So I think that's everything I wanted to talk about. Um and it is past 8:15. So yeah, I think this is a good place. Thanks for joining me, everybody. I'm going to be doing more like live wrap up type situations. I will. Okay, sorry, I couldn't see that. Okay, yeah, Erica fact checked, and he is an executive producer. So I was not just. I might not be able to fully talk about what the implications of that are, but he is associated with the project. So yeah, thank you for joining me, everybody. I'm going to be doing. So I've got March and April at least to get through too. So I'm gonna be doing live wrap ups on Wednesday at 7 until I get through those. So I'm going to be doing this next week, 7 p.m. EST again. If you want to join me, I'm going to work on getting these a little tighter, so everyone can see the covers of what I'm talking about, and so it's a little bit more clear what I'm saying. But yeah, thanks for watching. Have a good one. I hope you have a good night. I hope you take care of yourself. Goodbye.